Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Dean Speaker Series. I'm Jenny Chapman, the Dean at the Haas School of Business, and I am absolutely thrilled to welcome today's Dean Speaker Series, co-sponsored by the Center for Responsible Business. Is Robert here? No, Robert. Okay. We have the distinct pleasure to hear from Jen Hyman. I've been a fan for a really long time and a subscriber. Co-founder and CEO of Rent the Runway, a fashion company that disrupted the fashion industry and changed the way women, I would say people generally, think about fashion and how they acquire clothing. She co-founded the company in 2009 with Jennifer Fleiss, and since then has grown the business to include over 11 million members. Today, Rent the Runway's offerings have expanded to over 1,000 designer labels through an innovative revenue share model. With the fashion industry responsible for around 10% of global carbon emissions, Rent the Runway is making progress to reduce materials and water waste, displace new garment production, and offset 100% of estimated carbon emissions from shipments to and from customers. And this is a remarkable statistic, as the 30th female founder in the history of US markets to take her company public, the first to be CEO, Jennifer's been honored with many achievements. She was named to Fortune's 40 Under 40 list in 2012. She was one of Time's top 100 influential people in 2019, and one of People magazine's Women Changing the World in 2020. Jen serves on the board of directors of the Estee Lauder Companies, Baby List, the Woman.NYC Advisory Board, and is a founding member of the New York Stock Exchange Board Advisory Council, a champion of increased board diversity. She previously served on the boards of Zalando and Hinge and helped with Hinge's sale, yeah. Jen lives in New York City. I was just there a couple of days ago, visiting our alums, with her husband and 3 young children. Jen, we're so fortunate to have you here. Thank you for coming to Haas. So, quick housekeeping. If you haven't been here before, you all have a note card on your seat. If you have questions anytime during the discussion, please jot those questions down and pass them to the right. Carrie is over here to collect them. We will look through them and ask as many of them as we can at the later part of the session. So now I'm going to turn it over to Isa and Ravi, who are going to lead today's discussion. Let's call.
Thank you so much, Dean. Hey, everyone. I'm Isa. I'm full-time MBA, graduating this May.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ravi Malhotra. I'm an evening and weekend MBA student, and I'm also a board member. Currently, I work as a VP of Finance at a medical device company called Heartbeam, and where we are solving the problem of transforming the cardiac care. And thank you, Jennifer, for being here and talking to our student community. And thanks to everyone who is here and also watching us online for this amazing conversation. So let's begin. Jennifer, we'd love to audience to hear your story, specifically in terms of how the idea of Rent the Runway came in, seeing your sister struggle with the cost of a single dress, and you went on to co-found the company. Looking back, what early experience would you say that shaped how you approach the building this transforming company and the business today?
So you don't want to hear the founding story. You want to hear the what influenced me.
I think basically how the idea come to fruition in terms of forming the company and in terms of that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to answer both questions, the question I thought you said and the other one. Okay. There's 2 things that actually influenced me into becoming an entrepreneur. One of them is the fact that I grew up in a family with a severely autistic sister, and I had to every day learn intrinsically about the value of a team, and that really nothing great in life is ever done alone, and it always involves continuous resilience and continuous struggle and continuous finding the joy in everyday moments. And I think that entrepreneurship and the journey of business in general is really hard. And to have the backbone of understanding that life is better in a team and understanding about resilience was kind of a key factor for me in becoming an entrepreneur. The second component is actually my first job right after I graduated from college. I graduated from college right after September 11th, 2001, and a lot of industries were in disarray at the time. And one of the industries that was in disarray was travel. No one wanted to travel because they were scared. And so I went to work for a travel company because I thought that industries that are in a semblance of free fall have to innovate. And so there's going to be opportunities for young people to do things that are out of the ordinary there. And in my time at Starwood, I saw that I believed that my generation, which were millennials, had entered a new kind of experience economy where we were starting to value experiences like travel, like restaurants, like spending time with our friends more than we valued stuff. And Starwood had this problem where it had done a great job with business travelers and not with leisure travelers. So I pitched the president of the company on me starting the first ever honeymoon registry in the world and viewing that as an entree into building leisure loyalty with kind of a new generation of customers for Starwood. What was interesting about this is I was 22. I obviously went to the president of a 200,000 person company to ask for money, which is crazy looking back on it. But he gave me the money, and I spent the next few years building out what became a really successful business for Starwood and was recognized on the Oprah show. And what I learned from that was actually the power of influence. So I built this business for a major company. No one reported to me. I didn't have any direct reports. I had to get people from this global company all over the world to do stuff for me. And the only way they were going to do it was if they liked me. And if they believed in my vision around this idea. And so from a very young age, I learned hey, you have to constantly be in the business of inspiring people, influencing them, building just relationships with them. Some of the people that did stuff for me at Starwood simply did it because they thought I was fun or nice or whatever they thought. And those two lessons together, I think, gave me the backbone to pursue entrepreneurship once I had the idea. The idea really came from me that I was at HBS. I went to HBS a little bit older. I had worked for 5 years. I took on the financial cost of HBS on my own, and so it was extremely expensive for me. I took out hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans, and I was home for Thanksgiving with my sister. She had just been invited to her first wedding post-college. She was making $50,000 a year at the time as a buyer at Bloomingdale's. She had gone to Bergdorf Goodman, which is a very fancy department store in New York. She had bought a $4,000 dress that put her into credit card debt. I was her older sister. I was in her apartment with her, and I was like, Becky, return the effing dress. This is insane. Your closet is filled with things you've only worn once. You need to wear something in there and return that dress. And she was like, I can't. My closet is dead to me. I've been photographed and everything. The photos are up on Facebook. I need to wear something new. Now, this was 2008. The news feed had just launched on Facebook, meaning photos were just available on Facebook. And my idea was, oh my God, social media is going to change how we think about ourselves. It's going to make us all into brands, and that is going to fundamentally shift industries. It's going to shift how we consume clothing because we're going to start to value variety in fashion as opposed to quality because we're going to have to show up for every moment in our lives differently. I had this idea. I was like, okay, well, what if there was a closet that was unlimited? What if there was a closet in the cloud where I could basically have this closet on rotation and rent clothes? Went back to school on Monday, shared the idea with a friend of mine. It was non-intentional. It was literally who I was sitting down with at lunch. It happened to be, lucky for me, someone who was awesome, a good friend, fun, and had very complementary skills to me, but there was no like thought of like, who should be my co-founder? It was a harebrained idea I had. I shared it with her. She was like, oh, this sounds really fun. Like, let's work on this so we could get out of a freaking class, you know, and use this as a school credit. And she was like, who do you think we should ask if this is a good idea? And I said, well, we should probably ask Diane von Furstenberg, who is a very famous fashion designer, and she was the president of the CFDA at the time. And my friend Jenny was like, do you know DVF? And I was like, I obviously don't know DVF, but we can email her. Like, we could figure out what her email address is. And so from Spangler, which is the cafeteria at HBS, we sent out emails to 12 different versions of dvf@dvf.com. One of them went through. We heard back from someone in her office, I'll see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. And I walked in on Tuesday to her office in New York in a DVF dress with my hair done and my nails done, et cetera, and introduced myself as the co-founder of Rent the Runway. And that's like really the beginning of it. Now, what caused me to pursue this as well? It was fun. I was really bored at business school at that point. I mean, we had 2.5 hours of class per day, and there's only so much partying that one person can do. And I was like, let me actually take advantage of this incredible environment that I'm in to, even if this doesn't amount to anything, I'm gonna learn a huge amount from doing this. And so we just spent the next 6-7 months that we were there really working, 12 plus hours a day on this idea. And it was so, so, so fun that now it's 18 years later.
That's so inspiring. Thanks for sharing that.
That's incredible, Jen. One nugget that I'm taking away from this is like how much grit you have to like enter the travel industry when no one was doing that, to like go to Diana, even though you were just like a beginning founder.
I do think that I have grit. However, I don't think that those are examples of grit. And I think that the conversation around courage and around risk-taking has to be completely turned on its head. So what I want to say to all of you in the room is you all go to Haas. It's a great school. Therefore, if you go and start your own business and it fails, it will take you all of 1 second to get another great job somewhere else. What is the risk? The risk is you spending an ounce of your life not pursuing something that is going to make you incredibly happy. The risk is you taking a job after school, continuing to do the thing you think you should do, as opposed to the thing that actually energizes you and brings real passion into your life. Many of you, in order to have gotten to a place like this, are probably similar to me, where you've been on a track your whole life, where you worked really hard in high school, you did well, you went to a great college, you got the prestigious job, you then applied to business school, you got into the prestigious school, you're here. It's like, start now realizing you have the credentials, and there is no risk beyond the one that you're wasting your own time. And I have never viewed starting Rent the Runway as a risk at all. Of course, there was some financial risk, right? I had taken out loans. I don't come from a wealthy family, so like it could have been a few months of me continuing to take on additional loans had this not worked. But then I would have been able to get another job. So I just want everyone to reframe for themselves as they think about their next steps, like, please find the things that are going to drive you to want to contribute the 110%. The thing that has kept me inspired for Rent the Runway over 18 years through the best of times and the worst of times is the mission of our company to empower women to feel great every single day. The team, the fact that I get to recruit an incredible group of people to work with, and the fact that I am having fun every single day. And I think that sometimes people underestimate how important it is to actually have fun at your job. You are going to spend 10, 12, sometimes more than 12 hours a day, 5 days a week doing it. So it's a big chunk of your life. You gotta make sure you're happy.
I also really admire how you've been so outspoken about inclusivity and equity when it comes to like paid parental leave or leadership representation. Could you talk a bit about how your lived experiences and your values influence what you've said in this realm and how you show up as a leader?
Sure. So one of the things that we did at Rent the Runway that was pretty revolutionary, and I didn't understand how revolutionary it was when we did it, was I equalized benefits between my corporate and hourly employees. So what is Rent the Runway? We're a fashion company, but we're also a hardcore logistics company. We have to employ thousands of employees actually in our operation in order to pioneer this, what we call just-in-time reverse logistics. And it's actually one of the most fun parts of the business. Who are my hourly employees? My hourly employees are people that, come from very disadvantaged backgrounds. They're making $20 an hour or $25 an hour. They are often people of color. They're often from immigrant communities. And I thought that they deserved the exact same benefits that I had. The same healthcare, the same parental leave, the same family sick leave, the same bereavement leave, whatever benefits I had as a corporate employee, like I thought that should be equal across the board. In reality, in most companies in America, corporate employees, which are salaried employees, get one set of benefits. Like you could work at a company that gives you 3 months or 4 months of parental leave, and then you go into the hourly population in a warehouse or in a customer service team, and often that same benefit will be like 2 weeks. And so we did this equalization of our benefits, and I wrote a piece about it for the New York Times once I realized that it was something that was different. And as opposed to just saying this is the right thing to do, I utilized the data that we had, which showed that equalizing our benefits actually financially led to better outcomes. One of the biggest costs amongst an hourly population is continuous recruiting and training. And once my employees felt safe and they felt like they were in an environment that was respecting them and treating them well, our attrition rates in our warehouses went down tremendously. And actually, the population of my company that has been the most loyal to Rent the Runway over the past 15 plus years has been my warehouse population. They have been there often at tenures of over, 10, 11, 12 years per employee. And so that alone of the fact that you have people who are knowledgeable, who are more productive, who are the ones who are working there. You don't have to be spending money on people who have higher training costs, lower productivity, higher attrition rates, and so making really the financial case that this is both a moral imperative and a financial imperative. So that became really, really important to me and is definitely, I actually believe that our hourly employees are one of the main reasons why we've been successful. Like our company is about delivery of a physical experience. And if we weren't awesome at what we do in those two facilities, like the whole thing would fall apart. And then as it relates to, equity within my corporate organization, I've never really thought about it as equity. I have always just hired great people. I've hired people who were customer obsessed. Because our customer base is 100% female, because our product is about how effectively women feel a new sense of power when they are wearing something that makes them feel confident or beautiful or relaxed or sexy or however they want to feel. It happens to be that a lot of the employees who have been most customer obsessed, a lot of the people who have been most passionate about Rent the Runway happen to be women. So as a result of that, we've had a team that has been, more female over time, and we were therefore the first company in history to ever go public with a female CEO, COO, and CFO.
It's so powerful. I think I call it leading with example. Managing benefits is really a good call on your part, setting the example for the others to follow. So really amazing. You talked about the IPO, and you IPO'd the company in 2021, and one of the only female founders to take the company public, which is again incredible. For emerging leaders and the people sitting in the room who might start their own companies, especially women and underrepresented founders and leaders, what advice would you give them in terms of leading with purpose, credibility, and impact?
I think that the numbers really speak for themselves. It is just the case that there's very few women and minorities in positions of power and leadership as it relates to founding their own business, getting capital from venture capital, as well as actually in the C-suite of all public companies. That being said, we can sit here and have a crusade around why that's the case, or we could just continue to move forward and do everything that we can to continue to be as ambitious as humanly possible, to know that, nothing comes to you unless you reach for it. And I personally, there's always someone who's willing to say yes. You could hear 1,000 no's, but the 1,001 person could be a yes. And maybe it took me way more cycles to raise the money runway. Maybe it was done at lower valuations than had I been a different gender. But I just really believed in what we were doing, and you just need to have as many women get to the place of power and success so that it becomes more pattern recognition. And one of the proudest, moments of my life related to our IPO was that I got to bring my two daughters at the time, who were, I think, 4.5 and 2.5, to ring the bell with me and our team. And at the end of that day, my daughter Aurora, who was my 4.5-year-old at the time, turned to me when we were going home, and she was like, "Mommy, that was so fun, but are there boy companies?" And I was like, "Aurora, every company is a boy company." What you saw today was very unusual. And it was just amazing that I had created a family where she felt like it was normal that her mom was going to go and run a company and take it public, and that was just part of a normal experience for her. And obviously that bubble was, will be broken very, very soon. But even just to let her live with that level of, yes, this is all possible for a period of time, I think you need to live a little bit in the delusion in order to continue to have that continuous forward momentum.
That's again so powerful, and I think the message is never give up, keep on trying what you're trying on, and success will definitely come to you.
I love that story, Jen. And I think even just having you here on this stage, like Aurora felt with you, like that's how we feel with you here. Like that, so much is possible. What's striking about Rent the Runway to me is behind such an incredible mission and value and business, and I'm a huge fan, as I've told you, and I have felt incredibly powerful and awesome when I wear your clothes. It's a really sophisticated operating model. And so you've been a pioneer in tech-enabled fashion. You've used personalization, data analytics, logistics long before your competitors. How did you keep technology and customer experience so central to your company from the early days?
Well, one of the things that I think has been most helpful has been a deep understanding from the very beginning of my strengths and my weaknesses. And I wanted my founding team and everyone on it to have strengths that were truly complementary to mine. So the first C-level hire that I made at Rent the Runway was actually a chief data officer, someone who was deeply analytical, who had actually a PhD in machine learning, and someone who could look at every problem from a completely different angle than I was going to look at it. I am someone who is very customer obsessed. I am visionary. I definitely lean more from a functional standpoint into areas like product management or marketing or deep customer insights. So I wanted my own beliefs on where the world was going and where the customer was going to be actually debated and challenged from the onset with someone who was very cut and dry and was just going to look at the numbers and be like, I don't believe what you're saying. Prove it to me. And that healthy tension within our organization, I think, set us up to always be building, for the customer. We set up a company that had systems around the continuous gathering of customer data and feedback and the dissemination of that information throughout the company, which is critical. Like, what is a company? A company, until the world of AI, what a company was a company is about how do you prioritize your resources in order to grow? And your resources mean you have a certain amount of capital, you spend we spent a certain portion of that on inventory, another portion of it on our supply chain and our logistics, and another portion on people. And those people, for the most part, were engineers who were building things. And we needed to figure out what were the things that they should build. And in order to figure out what is the business roadmap of your company, what is the product roadmap of your company, it really does have to be based on customer insight and data. And so that customer and insight and data has to be accessible at all times to everyone. So I think that one of the special aspects of Rent the Runway has been, from the very beginning, the ability to go deep on our customer data has been omnipresent in the organization. And we have set up ways for continuous access to quantitative data, to qualitative data, to continuous re-onboarding into the experience. So our customer base has changed dramatically, and their values have changed dramatically over the past 18 years. And so even if I onboarded 10 years ago and I spent a day in customer service and I spent a day in focus groups with customers, well, the customer post-COVID is totally different. You need to re-onboard yourself every year, every other year. So I think the systems that we set up, especially around data, have actually been the key to building the right technology, having the right levels of personalization, and building the features that have kept our customers loyal.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really insightful. And I was telling you in the green room when we were talking that during our operations class, some of these things we discussed, and our operation professor is also here. I'm looking at it, and like these insights which you're sharing, kind of like adding more color to that. So that's very, very helpful. In terms of the customer, which is at the core of the company, which I'm hearing, during my research, I was looking at it, and it was talking about that you have expanded your collaborations with the designers and also the inventory extensively after the restructuring which the company did. So how do you evaluate the brand partnerships specifically to pursue, what not to pursue? And what do you think about them as a growth lever or not? Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things to understand about Rent the Runway is that I think that I have three sets of customers. I have women like you, Isa, who use my product. I have brands, are another set of my customers, and I have my employees. So let's talk about brands. You guys probably talk, especially when you're learning about consumer companies, you often talk about what is your consumer value proposition. In most businesses with a consumer value proposition, there is also needs to be a supplier value proposition. Our suppliers happen to be designer brands. So at the very beginning of the business, I had to understand what that was. Why would brands ever want to work with me? And through initially this conversation with Diane von Furstenberg, which turned into me meeting prior to launching Rent the Runway with about 100 designer brands and various retailers, I learned that the number one problem in the fashion industry was actually customer acquisition. And their number two problem was the loss of their original and historical points of distribution, meaning stores were closing. It was becoming way more expensive for them to buy new customers on Google or on Meta. So it was really hard to get young women to try these brands, especially when you had really cheap substitutes coming from Zara and Shein and H&M. It's like if you're going to see a copycat from Zara, like, or now Quince, why would you buy the real thing with the higher price? And so I understood that Rent the Runway could essentially be the gateway drug for the fashion industry. If I put you in a new designer brand and you organically feel that it's high quality, you love the way it makes you look, you feel great in it, I had a belief that that would convert people into full price customers of our brands. What is actually the case is that the millions of women who utilize Rent the Runway, 80% of them end up purchasing from the designer brands they discover on Rent the Runway after they rent. And so we actually have become one of the most important customer acquisition engines for brands. So what I did was I went to the industry and I pioneered a new way of working. So the way that the fashion industry has worked in the past is fairly archaic. Designers manufacture something, retailers will buy it 6 months in advance at wholesale price. I will pay for that inventory when I receive it as a retailer, probably with net 30 or net 60 terms. A lot of that inventory will not work because people won't like it, and therefore it will be marked down, and it will go on sale, and then it will go into clearance and outlet stores around the country. And hence why TJ Maxx is an incredible business. So what I said to designers was, hey, this doesn't make sense for you or for us. We are a business that has incredible data. Our average customer comes to us 20 times a month. She's giving us an insane amount of data about where she's going, about her body, about what she likes, what she doesn't like, how something fits her. And for every article of clothing that you give me, dozens of women will wear it, and 90% of those women will post on social media about it. So tens of thousands of people will actually see this Max Mara skirt for every unit you give me. So I said, we're no longer going to pay for your inventory. We want to select the inventory that we believe has the highest chance of performance on our platform. We will procure it from you. We will then revenue share with you on the success of that inventory. Every time it turns, you make money and we make money. And you have the potential to make way more than your wholesale cost from it. And so what we did was we aligned incentives and we gave designers access to data. So real time, they got to see what their best sellers were, and they got to therefore give us more of their best sellers, swap out things that weren't working on their platform with other things that could work, because it was in their financial incentive to do so, and it was obviously better for us and better for our customers. So really understanding that a business needs to have this designer value proposition has pushed us to be as innovative related to how do we continue to transform our supplier value proposition over time? How do we continue to give more and more value to our brand partners so that they are winning from working with us? And they're not just viewing us as a sales channel. And in fact, whenever I meet with a head of sales who's skeptical about this, I always ask for them to bring in their CEO and bring in their chief marketing officer. And I'll often ask, how much do you spend to acquire a customer on Google? And the chief marketing officer will say $100 or $150 or $200. And I'll say, well, how much does it cost you to manufacture one incremental unit of inventory? And often it's way less than $100, but let's just use the $100 to be, easy math. Okay, well, I said, manufacture one incremental unit of inventory for me for $100. That unit will be worn by an additional 30 women. Those 30 women, 80% of them are going to end up being full price customers of your brand. What's your CAC now? Oh, and by the way, those 30 women are going to post on Instagram and TikTok and whatever about their experience, and all of their friends are going to hear about your brand too. So this is a much better marketing equation for you than spending your money on Google. So kind of flipping the conversation of like, we're not a sales channel. We're a marketing channel for you. And that has taken years of time to do because the industry was not used to that. Certainly the first pitch that I had of this new model was not met with love, but over time, the industry has seen in their own data that this is great for them.
Well, that's super helpful context in terms of how the business operates and how you think about inventory. Really helpful.
Yeah, and maybe just to add, I rented a dress for Haas prom this year, and it was one of my favorite dresses, and several of my friends after messaged me asking who the brand was, and if I wasn't a student with no income, I would totally buy from them as well. So totally see that in real time. You talked a little bit about Shein and Temu. Your brand is incredibly sustainable, so we're curious, if you were to look ahead 5 to 10 years, how do you expect consumer values and expectations around sustainability and fashion to evolve, and how is Rent the Runway positioned to lead that transformation?
So we are so proud to have been one of the companies that helped to change the way that people think about fashion. And prior to Rent the Runway, and The RealReal, and Poshmark, and ThredUp, and lots of incredible companies that changed the way that we think about fashion, the mass market thought that it was disgusting to wear clothes that had been worn by other people before. And the number one thing we needed to do at the beginning of Rent the Runway was actually make it aspirational to wear clothes that other people had worn before and make it feel smart to the consumer. Today, I'm so floored that when you look at Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they often shop secondhand first. And they view that as the coolest and smartest way to shop. So we were part of a movement that we were lucky that all of these businesses kind of launched around the same time. Actually, the founder of ThredUp was my classmate at HBS. We were good friends. The RealReal launched about a year after us. Poshmark launched about 2 years after us. So we had the momentum of all of these companies that were making secondhand viable at the same time. What has really become clear to me in all of the work and research that we've done over time is that the closet is the most underutilized part of the home in the United States. 80% of the items in a closet are worn 3 times or less. And so you are continuously in the habit of purchasing things that you are already renting. If 80% of your closet is worn 3 times or less, you are already renting the runway from your closet, right? You wear something once, you push it to the back of your closet, that is a rental. And what does that do? What is the cost of that? There's obviously a huge financial cost. It's extremely wasteful to buy things that you don't really wear. But there's a huge environmental cost because as we as consumers have started to buy more from cheaper and lower quality brands that tend to manufacture with synthetic fibers that utilize way more water and way more energy to produce that pair of leggings or that top from Shein. Those items have cost us an enormous amount from a sustainability standpoint to then sit there in your closet. So the goal from a sustainability standpoint at Rent the Runway is what we call displacement. By nature of having access to an unlimited closet, we have found that our customers end up purchasing less clothing. And when they do purchase clothing, it shifts their mindset to purchase things that have higher longevity, are things that will get utilization in their closet, because they know that they could access every trend and every, new thing from RTR. When they do buy, they're buying investment pieces that they could wear over and over again in colors that make sense for them to wear, which is why Rent the Runway rents an enormous amount of print and an enormous amount of color. Because if you're going to rent something that's butter yellow, which was the color of last season, which is now no longer the color this season, you should have been renting that. You shouldn't own that. So really getting the customer to stop thinking high-low in their closet and start thinking rent versus own. And actually, there's another category in the center of your closet. So there's rent, which is really the short term, I want this for a few days or a few weeks, and you could do that via a subscription to Rent the Runway. There's own, which is I want to wear this for years. I want each of these items to be worn dozens of times. There's a category in the middle, leasing. Leasing is what The RealReal does. I want a new bag for this season. I want it for the next 6 months. I want it for the next year. I'm going to buy it secondhand and I'm going to sell it back a year from now. That is leasing. All that we've done in clothing is we've helped to bring to fashion what has existed in other industries forever. I mean, transportation, you've always had an option to lease, to rent, to buy, to take a car from here to there. And so that optionality for the consumer is now present, and what we need to continue to do is educate the consumer to be smart about when she rents, when she leases, and when she buys.
That's really powerful perspective. Thank you so much for sharing. Really, really nice.
Great. My mind is exploding here, but mostly I'm thinking, I'm so glad I didn't wear my butter yellow suit today. My God. And Manish Chandra, the founder of Poshmark, is actually on our board. So he's the other HBS alum. So, yeah. So we have some really great questions. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but let's see how many we can get to. Here's one that says, RTR is such a fantastic case study of a circular economy. What do you do with the clothes that cannot be circulated anymore?
We sell them. So we have sample sales that are offline. We sell them, and there is a big movement around the repair and use of those clothes and giving them another life. And it's certainly a different customer base that frequents our sample sales, and I love that. That we tend to get more of a thrift customer that comes into the sample sales, and she is a lot more creative and original in how she's going to take this piece and zhuzh it up and change it and continue to use it. And so we do that. We will recycle a lot of clothing, and we'll donate as well. So we've had incredible partnerships in the past with organizations like Dress for Success, or we've outfitted proms in, disadvantaged communities all over the country. Because us retiring something doesn't mean that it, shouldn't be worn. Like, we would retire this skirt if it had a nick in it. Because every single time that we rent something to a customer, we want it to look brand new. So it's in our rotation if it kind of is indistinguishable how many times it's been worn. But if you think about your own closet, you have plenty of tops in your closet that probably have a little nick in it that you're still wearing. Your own closet is used. right after you wear something for the first time, you're wearing secondhand clothing every single day. It's just your own secondhand clothing. And so there's always, I think, another life for many of the clothes.
Yeah, amazing. I really feel like I need to clean out my closet. So this is a provocative question. It says, the audience for your service is female. Are there plans to expand to a male audience or being inclusive of more gender identities?
Well, we already are very inclusive of gender identities. I'm not saying that all my customers are female. I'm saying that the clothes tend to be more traditionally female. But, a lot of we found like a lot of the men who work at Rent the Runway, because there's a free subscription when you work at Rent the Runway, have found that like there's actually plenty of clothes on the platform that they love, that they're renting in their day-to-day lives. I personally think that from a business standpoint, we've only really just scratched the surface of this first customer base of women, and even just expanding the categories, the use cases, the age segmentation of which women we're going after, the brands. We're going to have an enormous amount of really exciting launches this year that are going to expand how you can use Rent the Runway and what types of brands and what types of use cases. So just to provide an example, like even last year, we launched for the very first time beach cover-ups, and we launched tennis core, like cute little outfits you could play tennis and pickleball in. And we launched, much more of an assortment in just very summery, casual clothing. And we saw that extended people's time on platform, because they used to churn in the hottest months of the year in July and August because they were on vacation or they were wearing jeans, shorts, and a blousey top, and we didn't really have the inventory for those use cases. And so sometimes it's smarter for us to expand the ways that our general core customer can use Rent the Runway today and extend her LTV before going into a entirely new segment where we would have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on new inventory.
So here's a question it's a kind of counterfactual question. If you were to build Rent the Runway over again with your current knowledge, which is unbelievably extensive, what would you do differently? What were the big mistakes that you learned from?
I would have had a founding CTO partner who I would have spent most of my time when I was at HBS in the School of Engineering recruiting who that co-founder was going to be. I would have launched the business a few years later and utilized Shopify and built some apps on top of Shopify to make the front-end tech stack much simpler. I would have... Can you say about that one? Why? Yeah, like we didn't know anything about engineering at the time and, how to build great software. We hired some people to code the initial site for RTR. They weren't great. The code, therefore, was not scalable, and that bad code kept on getting written over, and there was unnecessary tech debt that was built up that made future launches harder and more expensive. And I think just having someone who could have architected the system in the right way from the beginning would have been great. We had a very different situation actually as it related to operations, where even though my co-founder and I didn't have operations backgrounds, it was something that for whatever reason was easier for us to learn and understand. And what we did was we made sure that our initial warehouse was actually pretty close to our office so that we can go there on a daily basis and actually do every step of the operation ourselves. And we knew exactly what technology we needed to build out this reverse logistics system. So we never really had the same problems with the software and the supply chain that we did on the front end. But again, if I'm going back in time, like I want a CTO there the whole time. I think that I would have raised way more money sooner and utilize that money less on acquisition of people and more on acquisition of inventory, especially in these innovative ways, because inventory is your customer acquisition lever and your customer loyalty lever in a business like ours. So if I could go back in time, I can realize, hey, like my P&L should be completely flipped on its head. We're not a tech company in the way that Airbnb is a tech company. So let's stop thinking about ourselves that way. We need to just have the tech work. And then we need to spend all of our money making sure that the inventory is exactly what our customers want and what new sets of customers will want, and that our operation and customer service are best in class, and that's where we should be funding, that's what the capital allocation should be as it relates to the HR spend and the P&L spend.
Okay, so the next two are related, but I'm going to slide one of my own questions in before that, which is, what did Diane von Furstenberg tell you when you met with her?
Oh, she hated the idea. Oh my God. She was like, why would I ever do this? It's going to dilute my brand, which is the most important thing that I've built, right? This brand that I can charge higher prices, that is premium. It's going to, who would ever buy something ever again if they could rent it for 10% of the price? And my favorite was, and who the hell are you?
Yeah.
Because I had no experience in fashion, and it's an industry that is based around relationships and trust. And that was one of the things that I learned from the very onset of, I have to invest time in building trust with the entire industry. I need to show up many times per year, even when they say no every single time, and update them and give them more information and make them feel and know that I'm here for the long haul, and that I'm going to prove to them that I'm going to be a real partner to them. And there are industries that it doesn't matter how smart you are or how much data you come in with or how brilliantly you give your pitch. If they don't trust you, you will never get to a yes. And so we started with that first meeting, the process of building trust. And, for some brands, it took me 10 years to sign them on. 10 years of me showing up 5 or 6 times a year to meet with them. And I think the brands were surprised that I continued to do that for those 10 years. But I'm like, hey, let's continue to get together. I kind of love some of the things that some of them said to me. Like the CEO of one of the most famous brands in the world, luxury brands, who we have a great partnership with today. And he told me that hell will burn over before I work with Rent the Runway. And that just made me really smile and laugh. And I'm like, I'm so excited to come back in a quarter and update you on what we've been up to.
Awesome. So here's a reflective question. Many startups, to reach the next phase of growth, have their founders exit. You've defied this pattern. Why do you think that is?
I think the humility to continuously be learning and rehiring myself, meaning like, what do I need to learn? How do I need to evolve for this next phase of the business? Having the humility to understand that there have been times in the journey where I've been a great leader. There have been times where I've been a not great leader, and I've been able to recognize those times where I've been a not great leader and actually change and make the modifications that were appropriate for the scale of the business. I also think that a founder CEO is one of the most special and underrated things that any business can have. At its best, in any founder CEO company, you have an organization of missionaries and not mercenaries who are there because they really believe in the mission of what they're doing. It's more than a job to them. And that culture of being part of a missionary organization is really addictive to, your employee population. And you also have a culture where the founder CEO typically is someone who learned on the job. And they therefore believe that anyone and everyone can learn on the job. And they therefore extend enormous opportunities for growth and learning to their employee base. And that creates even more loyalty within an organization like that. So one of the major lessons that I've learned over the past 18 years is that it is actually not only okay, but a positive for a founder to continuously be in founder mode forever. There's a notion in business that we're taught, especially by VCs who are sitting around the table, and about 5 years in, 10 years in, they will say to everyone, like, hey, we need to scale this thing. You need to bring in people with more experience. You need to scale yourself. You need to start delegating everything, and you need to be a manager of managers. And I think that there were times at Rent the Runway where I listened to that advice, and I did that, and it was not correlated with financial success for the company. I think that where the company has been in its best is where I've exhibited what I call founder mode, which actually gives everyone permission to be in founder mode. And what founder mode is you identify, let's say, the 3 biggest opportunities or challenges of that business, and even though you're the CEO, you're going to still be at the 1-foot level around those things. Now, there's probably 53 other things that you have delegated that you're not at the 1-foot level. But the fact that you're going to still understand every level of detail in the weeds of the things that are most important, it actually gives permission to your direct reports and their direct reports to do that as well. And that idea of continuously staying close to the customer, staying close to the code, staying close to, the feedback and to the marketing, like that has been critical to our success, and it's been critical to the fun I've been able to have at the business that has kept me here.
Amazing. Did she say culture? So I've studied culture a little bit, and the research shows that founders have a huge edge in terms of defining the culture and actually updating it as strategic opportunities change. So your experience is very well established in the research. I'll send you my book that's coming out next week.
I would love that. I think that if any of you have the opportunity to work for a founder, I've had the privilege of becoming friends with many founders over the last, 18 years, and founders are an extremely inspiring and crazy group. And I think that there's no one that's better to learn from, because you do have to be a little bit crazy to be a founder and to stay in the game. You have to be obsessed. And that level of obsession with continuous improvement, with the customer, with your employees, with creating culture, there's the positive side to that is like you create and you are a passion generator. You're an energy generator. Obviously, the downside to that is like you probably create an environment where the work ethic is very high in your organization. So people that like to shut off after 5 o'clock don't go work for a founder. But there is something very energizing around being with people that continuously are energized by a problem years later, and continuously see, how can we make this better? How do we innovate again? And I love actually spending time with founders in completely different industries than Rent the Runway, because I take back so many learnings to my own business.
So this is the part where I do a little humble bragging. UC Berkeley is the #1 university in the country for venture-backed startups. and the #1 for women-based venture-backed startups as well, ahead of your alma mater, ahead of the school down the road that rhymes with Banford. So we're really proud of that. And you look out in this audience, and there are a multitude of founders out here. So I think you're really speaking to a very inspired and energized group.
Well, you guys also have the benefit of a new world that we've now entered into because of AI. And as opposed to the doomsday scenario that many people are, talking about, with many people losing their jobs, which I do actually think that's going to happen. Where I'm most bullish is in the opportunities for people who are young, for people who are AI native, and who are approaching problems with that hasn't been calloused over by doing things an old way for the last few decades. I sit on the board of this company, Babylist, that recently has truly innovated how they're thinking about their engineering team. And they've thought about not just agentic coding, but they have flattened what the roles and responsibilities are between product and engineering and design. They're like, actually, you guys are all the same. You're all going to be builders. And thinking about yourself today and really doing as much work as you can right now when you're in school to get and utilize every single AI tool and to start building and to figure out how to do that, like, it will put you way ahead in terms of your career. The people at Rent the Runway right now who are innovating the most are like our 24-year-olds, the people with the least experience. And that is extremely exciting for all of you, because as much as in business school you like to think you have experience, you don't. You worked for a few years before you came here, and that makes you awesome, and it makes you way more competitive to the economy that we're going into, because it is much harder for an old dog to learn new tricks.
Yeah, well, as we close out here, we just fast-tracked an AI certificate for our students, so we're really immersing them in the world of AI, and they are eager to move towards it. So as we close out, what I noticed about Jen as a leader is we have 4 defining leadership principles here at Haas. The first one is question the status quo, which it was sort of remarkable how you saw the growth of media as an opportunity for this idea that you spawned. Incredible. The students always piece just comes through loud and clear. That's a second of ours. And there's also a kind of confidence without attitude, the humility to be willing to be wrong, be willing to accept better ideas than your own. And then the beyond yourself piece, which is how you've thought about your compensation packages and your warehouse folks. It's really quite remarkable. I'm surprised you're not a Haas student, actually. So, Jen, thank you so very much for sharing your expertise and wisdom. It really has been a remarkable hour. Thank you really for coming out. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. One last thing before I go. I would just like to say that we at Rent the Runway pioneered a new, part of the fashion industry that is now mainstream. And myself and my co-founder and our founding team didn't have any experience in fashion, logistics, or technology. And those are the 3 things that we had to be great at in order to do it, which is all to say, any idea that you have, you could go and run off and do. Like, as long as you are open to continuous learning and this idea that like failing is just a way to learn and failing is a way to get to the right answer, like, go for it and go again into the thing that is energizing to you. And the thing about Rent the Runway that was always energizing to me is that it was fun and that it made women feel awesome about themselves. So find that why for yourself. It doesn't matter if you don't have the experience, you can figure it out.